My name's Tom Kaminsky, and I recover loud.
In the heart of Boston, where the winters bite cold, I learned to rise, I learned to be bold. Dad was my hero, a champion of the ice, but the day he left I lost paradise. And the bottle whispered my name, calling me back to the depths of the night, on an endless track. Now I rise, one day at a time, giving hope in every line. L.A. Tommy K making the call from the darkness above. Now I stand tall. Now I stand tall. Oh, for years I wrestled my ghost, a company man, but in darkness I coast. From the highs of success to the lows of despair, staring at shadows, I was gasping for air. On a Disney trip, the waves crashed through me, withdrawing my strength, I feared the debris. Now I rise, one day at a time, giving hope in every rhyme. L.A. Tommy K, make you will call. Well, atop against the world, now I stand tall. Now I stand tall. The dive in my spirit, united my frame. Little worlds full of hope will never be the same.
L.A. Tommy K, and this is what freedom looks like. This is free of alcohol and drugs, living sober, one day at a time, being in nature, staying active, and not drinking. This is L.A. Tommy K saying, be with your feet on.
Igniting my flame. In a world full of hope, I'll never be the same.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
What is your recovery date?
February 5th, 1998.
1998. So that's 27 years.
I think it's 9,939 days. One day at a time, baby.
It is just one day at a time. Is that count more for you or for the people in the meetings to show?
Both.
Yeah.
Both. I think it's like, I go to a lot of beginners meetings, right? And I can tell you something. I love when I see the red faces, the flapping legs, because I look at that person and say, thank you. I don't have to go back there. Thank you for the memory that lets me remember that I was there 27 years ago and I never want to go back.
What was your drug of choice, Tom?
More, right? I mean, if you wanted to go up, hey, let's go up. You wanted to go down, let's go down. You wanted to go tripping, fine, I'll take a ride, not a problem. And there was always booze, right? Yeah. When there was nothing else, you could always rely on good old Jack. And, so it really didn't matter. Mm-hmm. I think the real issue was I didn't like where I was, right. And I wanted to get out of here. Mm-hmm. And it didn't matter what I was. And like anybody in addiction, mm-hmm. alcoholic, drugs, whatever, one's too many and a thousand's never enough.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I've found, so I work in prevention now. I worked in recovery for 4 years as a recovery coach, becoming certified here in the state. And it all came down to the same thing. It's not the substance that we're addicted to. It's the escape. It's the hiding. It's the, not wanting to feel or remember or deal with today.
No question about it.
So whether it's alcohol, whether it's drug, whether it's gambling, whether it's sex, whether, it could be anything. Regardless if somebody's drinking or using, if they're doing something that's negatively impacting their life, then take a look at it. Because there's a reason for that, and it's a dangerous slope.
But a lot of people they're in denial. They don't even know. Okay, I can remember back when, I thought I had it all together. I had a big business. I had a lot of people working for me, and they would be afraid to see which guy was going to show up in the morning.
Yeah.
Walking on eggshells, and like I'm nodding out at meetings and smell like booze, and it's like, it was, I didn't think I had a problem.
Right.
And I think it's really, I don't know if it's you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, if you're desperate, if it's the grace of God, or all three. I go to a lot of meetings, and look, I'm in LA, so we're pretty fortunate to have zillions of meetings every day of the week, right?
Yeah.
Every time. But like, I go to remember that moment of surrender.
Yeah.
That I think anniversaries really help bring me back to where it all started.
Mm-hmm.
And my moment of surrender, I was in Disney World with my 3 kids and my wife, all sound asleep. 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm lying on the floor, shaking and baking in my own skin.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. I was scared. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know anything about the disease of alcoholism or addiction.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so what do you do? What does somebody in early sobriety do?
Back when you did it in 98, did people talk about recovery? Was it something that you knew you could go do? Did you believe you could get sober and that there were programs that would keep you sober? Was it kind of a mystery to you?
It was a mystery. I went to rehab, okay? Mm-hmm. And rehab, I did not stay long enough. I did it my own way kind of thing. And I checked myself out after 5 or 6 days. And I went to an outpatient program. But they connected me into, meetings in the area that I was from. Mm-hmm. And, I just went. And, you go to I went to Alcoholics Anonymous. And you go to a meeting, and it's almost like a foreign language.
Right.
People are hugging each other and saying prayers and expressions, and it's like, how did I get here?
Right.
And it was scary. And it honestly, Mike, it took me 16 years to admit to my circle of friends that I was an alcoholic and I was in sobriety and in recovery. But, there's the shame and the stigma, right?
What are your thoughts and feelings about today's situation where people are out there? We recover loud. We don't let the shame keep us down because we know that that's holding us back. What are your thoughts on that? The difference between today and back then?
I think there is less of a stigma, especially around alcoholism. I think there's still a greater stigma when it comes to drugs and IV drug users, that type of thing, fentanyl, which is scary. Look, my disease took me to shooting heroin, okay? So not a pretty sight, but back then they cut it with baking soda. Today they cut it with fentanyl. And it's like playing Russian roulette. But I think the acceptance of states and local communities there's an awareness out there that like it's okay to be in recovery, and I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah.
The flip side of that is I think the technology, especially the phones, is a good and bad device. And I've been going to meetings for 27 years, and the old timers, like, they would tell you to take the cotton out of your ears, put it in your mouth, sit down, shut up, and listen. Today, a lot of young people are too busy on the phones in a meeting.
Okay.
And honestly, Mike, when I go to meetings 5 to 6 times a week. I'm on the edge of my chair because I want to hear one thing that the speaker has to say that'll help me keep sober that day. And if you're on the phone and you're looking at text or your photos or emails, you might miss something that might save your life.
Absolutely.
That it's a good and bad thing that the technology has allowed for Zoom and internet and all that great stuff, smart recovery. There's so much out there, but it's also, there's a negative side to it too.
I think whether you're doing an online meeting or a meeting in person, you have to be committed to the time. If you're going for it to benefit from that, then you got to get the benefit and do what you need to do to make sure you're benefiting. I think during the pandemic, meetings were all shut down. Nobody could travel around. People were starving for connection. A Facebook group that I started called Recovery on the Road. And I did that just so that, I could share my truth to hold me accountable, to try to encourage other people to, follow a path, whatever that may be. It really evolved into something. And the internet, the phones, the computers, I think that provided an outlet when we really needed it. Because I know we were all worried about people getting worse throughout the pandemic because they're isolated, pain and trauma and sickness.
And suicide.
Yeah, and we all talked about it. We all thought about it. And I think once this started for me, I saw so much opportunity. I started, distributing Narcan, having Narcan trainings online, running online meetings, just anything, to try to connect people or with people. And I did it for myself just as much as for anybody else because I needed that connection.
You are a channel of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, the basics, what Bill and Bob started in 1935 was one alcoholic helping another. And they teach us in our literature that in order to keep it, we must give it away. Yeah. And service is the touchstone to enlarging your spiritual condition. You are doing God's work, and God bless you for doing it. You helped so many people, and you helped yourself stay sober one day at a time, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what it's all about, giving back.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And, I just grateful to be a part of this evolution, because I tell people all the time, the drugs on the streets today are nothing like they were back when you were doing drugs, and not even that's so long ago. It's just so much has changed, and you mentioned fentanyl and, then there's the carfentanil. Now there's trank dope, which is, resistant to Narcan. So it seems like every time we get a step ahead, something new comes out. It knocks us back a little bit. And you said you sponsor people in your program, correct?
I do.
Have you done that right along?
I sponsor people, but I don't sponsor as many people as maybe a typical alcoholic with the type of the time of recovery that I have. And the reason that is because I mentioned to you when we first met, I facilitate call it a work study, big book work study shop. It's called an AWOL, which stands for a way of life or a way of living. And I take a group of people, I facilitate 10 to 12 people and take them through an intensive study of the 12 steps. And it's 7 months long. There's homework. There's a lot of commitment and reading and preparation for me each week. So I spent 7 months of my year working on that. And then I sponsored probably, 2 to 3 people in addition to that. So I stayed very active in the program.
A couple of years ago, I had brought, as a certified recovery coach, I opened up a satellite office for a program that I worked in Southern Maine. When I'd come home, I refused to come back home for like 4.5 years because I knew what was up here, and I knew it wasn't conducive to my recovery at the time.
Good for you.
Thank you. And I was living homeless in my car for almost a year because I didn't want to come back to this. I wanted to give myself enough time, enough of a chance to really understand it and get it. Because in the beginning, I didn't. I went to rehab and got kicked out. I moved into a sober house. I got kicked out. And it was because I could point to everybody and tell them what they needed to do. But, I forgot about these fingers.
Yeah.
I went to a couple of the meetings. Like I said, there's 3 here in this area all week long. And I noticed there were no book studies. So I actually started a book study meeting myself because I want people to understand the program. So I just wanted to say thank you for doing that part, because I think that's one of the most important parts of the program, is to really learn what the program is without.
And Mike, when you're talking about book studies, you're speaking of the 12 steps, correct?
The big book and the blue book and, whichever program. Because when I was in rehab, I read every book I could find in the building, because I've always been one that wants to understand things. I don't understand it all today, but I understand it so much better now because I read everything I could. We weren't supposed to isolate, but I would take a book into the bathroom and read because I wanted to know, what is this thing that's got such a grip on me that I can't, overcome it myself with my own free will, So yeah, it was, I think that was an important part for me in my recovery, and I saw the benefit of it. So, that's what I wanted to do for people in the beginning, is just get them the information that I know is out there.
When you talk about doing the 12 steps, why do we do the 12 steps to begin with, right? We only have to do step 1 perfectly.
Right.
Everything else is just a suggestion, right?
Yeah.
And if you're powerless over alcohol and your life is unmanageable, it is advised that the steps will work better for you if you are abstinent from drugs and alcohol than if you're not. That being said, steps 2 through 12 allow you to not only get in touch with who you are, but to forgive yourself, to make an amends to other people, to do spot check inventories, to be conscious of doing the right thing, to perhaps find a higher power, and then to do service. It's all summed up. I'm sure you've heard it, like nothing I'm not saying is original.
Right.
Clean house, trust God, help others, period. That's it. Right?
Yeah. And I remember sitting in the meetings, and when they said they had a roadmap to recovery for me, I thought, perfect, that's what I've been looking for, because I don't know how to do it. And if you can tell me what steps I need to do, I can follow a recipe, and, spot checking myself, that was one of the biggest things. When I was living homeless in my car, I would drive hundreds of miles during the day just to find a new place to sleep, but I would sit there at night. I would go to a meeting wherever I was, which that was a great opportunity to meet new people, get new insight, find out, somebody else's story. And then I would sit there in Walmart parking lot or a rest area somewhere between here and Massachusetts, because I would come north or go south. But I would think about the day and think about how I might have miscommunicated things, how people might not have understood what I was saying. How could I do things better so that I didn't come across, in ways that I used to before. Because I was one of those guys that always said, "No, that's not what I meant. You're not listening to what I said. You're thinking." It was me. I wasn't communicating properly. So I could practice that stuff. And then the next day, if the opportunity came up, I would try that new method. And if I forgot that, you know what, I'm going to have another chance. I'll just try it again next time, until it became, you know, muscle memory, you know?
You're talking about self-awareness versus
Yeah,
self-centeredness. We get sober and we start to think of ourselves less.
right.
That's why we're doing the 12 steps.
Yeah.
Because look, a lot of people can stop drinking.
Mhm.
And in California, we have this thing called California Sober.
Mhm.
And, that's people on the marijuana maintenance program.
Mhm.
And, they might not be drinking, but in my humble opinion, and this is just my perspective, a drug is a drug is a drug is a drug. And marijuana is a gateway drug. And how can you clear the mind and, to your point, have a sense of morality and start thinking about what you did and try to do it better when you're still putting a substance in your body?
Yeah. And I can understand that, and I don't want to seem argumentative at all. But recovery is a process.
Sure.
So, I still smoke cigarettes today. I'm not 100% healthy, It's a goal of mine, but I couldn't quit everything all at once.
I don't blame you. I don't see anyone could.
Right. So, I quit what I could. I did the work on this part. Now I'm going to work on the next part. And then once I'm good with that, I'm going to work on the next part.
I smoked in early recovery.
What's that?
I smoked.
Yeah. Well, regardless of what the vice is, because of course, I know a lot of people in the programs, eventually they'll give up sugar, they'll give up caffeine. I'm not even considering that stuff because, but those are also mind altering substances, right? But when I went to the AA meetings, I was like, well, I wasn't an alcoholic. But then I realized, I didn't have a problem with alcohol unless I was drinking alcohol, So every time I had a drink, I was drinking alcoholically. It ended in trouble every time, but I didn't crave a drink every day. I had friends who drank and I would sit there and do my stuff while they were drinking. But if I said yes to one, the night was going a different direction, Yeah. So, it took some realization, it wasn't day one, but, later on I did figure it out, that I can't drink because, I realize this now. So, it's all, I think nobody's finished in their recovery, right? We never get better. So, if somebody's still using, marijuana, if somebody's still drinking today, to me, I look at it as they're not done. They're still working to get better. Maybe that's their goal for next month. Who am I to say? So I just, that's how I see that. But, I understand to get the ultimate, freedom to work on everything, to understand and to be the best we can, we have to get away from all those things, and, like I said, if that's somebody's goal, then great. If they're not there yet, I encourage them to keep going,
100%. AWOLs are not sanctioned by Alcoholics Anonymous.
They're not.
Not at all, because, there is commitments, and if you miss 2 meetings in a row, you're out. If you drink, you're out. If you miss 4 in a row, you're out. You can't be late. So no Alcoholics Anonymous meeting is like that. You come and go as you please.
Right. Yep.
So that's why AA does not sanction it. However, we use the big book, the 12 and 12. It's based on Alcoholics Anonymous and the big book and the 12 and 12 and the little red book and on and on and on.
So of all the things that, you learned, I know what I feel are the most important lessons I learned through those meetings. What do you think the most important lesson that you learned in your recovery?
That I'm not alone.
Mm,
That I'm not alone, and I have. It's okay to be wrong,
yeah.
and I have somebody I could call, and it's just really not to be too hard on yourself.
Yeah.
Like, remain teachable, and this spiritual awakening. If I had to say one thing, it's a wheat program.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else, I believe, on this planet that you will find such a fellowship that, look, these are people that you would normally not mix with.
Right.
And there's no judgment. When somebody walks in after a slip or a relapse, the first words out of people in the meeting is welcome back.
Welcome back. Yep.
So it's a we program, and I don't have to do it alone. I learn from my sponsees who have 1 year, who have 3 years, who have 5 years, and I learned from my sponsor who's got 38 years. So, it's like, I think the whole thing is Rule 62, right? Don't take yourself too seriously.
Right.
Remain teachable. And I don't know anything. I don't know everything.
Right.
I just, I'm trying to get better one day at a time.
Yeah. There's been a couple times in my recovery journey where I felt like I had so many things coming to me, and it felt like I had to have all the answers. And I didn't. And when I didn't, I was straight up and said, I don't know. But then, that self, guilt, self-doubt, imposter syndrome, all those feelings come back. And then you look around, or at the time I looked around, and like I said, we don't have a lot of meetings. We don't have a big recovery community. And, it was like, where do I go? So, I can appreciate everything you just said about, it's not the length of time in recovery. It's the experience you have that really matters. Because if you've gone through something that I haven't gone through yet, then I can learn from you.
I know a lot of people don't respond to this, but when it all comes down to it, it's between you and God.
Yeah.
I choose to call my higher power God. And, it's a really simple process. And I learned this many years ago. If I have a decision to make, and if it's one that I believe God would see as a caring decision, I do it. If God would see it as not a caring decision, I don't. And if I don't know, I don't do anything.
Right.
We have a thinking problem, not a drinking problem. I suffer from inadequacy. I suffer from self-esteem issues, trust issues, abandonment issues. But through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and the steps, and of 4 steps specifically, I was able to identify what those feelings were, put a label on it, and then get outside help. Because sometimes AA is just not enough.
Right. Acceptance. We can't deny who we are. And we can't deny what we struggle with. For me, the most important lesson I felt I learned was acceptance. The acceptance prayer, and I saw one of your TikToks recently where you recited the acceptance prayer, and I recited it right there with you as I was watching your video. And, that was the one I was saying every day, multiple times a day, because I had to remember that the problem isn't out there. It's here,
LA Tommy K will be my TikTok handle. And I talk about sobriety. I talk about my real life experience. I talk about early sobriety, what it's like, the obsession, the addiction, and how to stay sober one day at a time.
What's the greatest gift you've received in your recovery?
Family. I have 3 kids. I have an amazing wife. We're married 40 years this September. My kids love me. They grew up with a sober father. We are all authentic and truthful, and that's the gift that I've received. No question about it. You know, I had a liver transplant 12 years ago, I told you.
Yes.
And that was a direct result of this disease. So I got the gift of life because I was sober and got to see my kids get married, and my kids have kids. So family, it's all about family.
You know, families recover together. You know, we have to end that generational trauma.
The family disease.
Well, thanks again, Tom, for doing this. I'm real happy I met you, and we'll stay in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Recover.